Welcome to the Summer Thunder Podcast, the pagan podcast that gives the devil his due. Hi, in today's episode, I'd like to take a look at some of the things that maybe indicate the sort of philosophy that I feel is appropriate for a pagan as I see it. In order to do this, I will just take the easy route and represent a podcast that I did when I was still a Satanist. This podcast is basically a presentation of the Book of the Law with various excerpts from it, and I really do find this a pretty good guide. Crowley thought of himself as somebody who had a mission, apart from anything else, to bring back paganism, and I think that he was well guided in many ways. So, without further ado, here is the Old Summer Thunder Podcast. I hope you enjoy it. In this episode, I wanted to have a look at a satanic source, namely the Book of the Law, Liber Legis, which is a document which was received by Aleister Crowley in 1904. He received this document from a being that he called Awas, and who he identified with Set and Satan. So I would consider this to be a satanic source document. I don't consider any document received by a human medium to be infallible or to be the literal word of a god. However, I do think that there are inspired documents and that these can give us guidance, and I do believe that the Book of the Law has a genuine quality to it, and I do believe that it was received by Crowley from Satan. So what I would like to do is have a look at the Book of the Law and see if there are any basic, simple things that we can pick up on, which can act as a guidance to us and give us some indication of the direction of satanic philosophy and what Satan wants for us, in a sense. Early on in the Book of the Law, there is the following short line. It is in chapter 1, verse 3. Every man and every woman is a star. This simple statement actually underlines a great deal of what we find in satanic philosophy. Every person is sovereign unto themselves, every individual. And in this sense, each person is, at the deepest sense, their own guide, though we do find guidance, of course, from outside sources, and we do need these guides and guidances. But the final authority needs to be within a person themselves. In chapter 3, verse 17, it says the following: Fear not at all. Fear neither men, nor fates, nor gods, nor anything. Money fear not, nor laughter of the folk folly, nor any other power in heaven or upon the earth or under the earth. New is your refuge, as had it your light, and I am the strength, force, vigor of your arms. Now, this verse indicates that we are not to take notice of fear, that fear is not to be our guide, and that fearlessness is one of the things that's expected of Satanists. Naturally, fear does have an organic function in our lives in various ways, but the place of fear in our deeper functioning is repudiated. We actually have to be fearless in the way that we approach life, and not be fear of anything in any of the worlds, not be fearful of money or poverty, not be fearful of ridicule, not be fearful of the opinions of others. Fearlessness is one of the major qualities to be found within Satanism. In chapter 1, verse 39, we come upon one of the central concepts of Crowley's teaching, and one of the central concepts that came through the Book of the Law. Chapter 1, verse 39 states, The word of the law is thelema. Now, thelema, which is the key concept of Crowley's work, is a Greek term which can be translated as will, volition, or as work in the sense of a chore, an errand, a job to do. So we can see that there's an emphasis on the capacity to do in relation to what one wills and intends. But there's also a sense that this is actually really very practical. There's a tendency to look upon Crowley's work and see greatly abstruse things, highly refined, abstract ideas. But the fact is, Thelema comes down to very practical things for a person. It's about our capacity to do work. It's our capacity to do. Chapter 3, verse 60 states, "There is no law beyond do what thou wilt." And this again is one of the central dictums of Thelema. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Now this of course doesn't mean do whatever you want in some sort of capricious sense, as that would be simply stupid. The doing here is the doing of one's true will. It's the doing of one's real work, the work which is dependent upon one's true nature. The word do in this sentence is capitalized in the middle of the sentence, and I think this shows the primacy of action and doing. The law is predicated upon one having found one's true will, one's true course, based upon one's essential nature, and upon doing that will. The only law is to do your real work. We find a number of verses in the Book of the Law which relate to how we should view and relate to life in general. Chapter 1, verse 30, "This is the creation of the world, that the pain of division is as nothing, and the joy of dissolution all." Now, in this verse, we can see the recognition of suffering in life, but joy is primary. Satanism has a positive orientation towards existence and towards life, and this is what it encourages us to take up. We don't deny hardship and suffering, but we value joy and fulfillment above these things. We have to be strong in this regard. Chapter 2, verse 9, "Remember all ye that existence is pure joy, that all the sorrows are but as shadows, they pass and are done, but there is that which remains." Again, we have the affirmation of life as essentially joyful. It's not easy, it's not without suffering, but the core of life is nevertheless joy. Chapter 2, verse 17, "Hear me, ye people of sighing, the sorrows of pain and regret are left to the dead and the dying, the folk that not know me as yet." In this verse we see that Satan, the devil, is known by some and not by others, and a different attitude to life is expected of the devil's folk. Pain and regret are not to be dwelt upon. Everyone has painful things in their lives. Everyone has to face suffering. But as Satanists, we're not to allow this to dominate us. We are not to dwell upon these things, because we have work to do, and life is essentially joyful. Chapter 1, verse 41, "The word of sin is restriction. O man, refuse not thy wife, if she will. O lover, if thou wilt, depart. There is no bond that can unite the divided but love. All else is a curse. Accursed, accursed be it to the aeons hell." Now, this is one of a number of verses with a libertarian slant, and the focus is on authenticity and honesty in relationships. It doesn't say that we should be careless or sloppy in our way of relating to people, but it does say that we should be honest and truthful, and that we should throw off false strictures. We may place strictures upon ourselves as a form of discipline, and of course we should. We all need limits and we need to understand our limits. But the false strictures, which we simply accept because we've been taught them, these are not to be things that bind our lives unthinkingly. To take on these kind of unthinking bindings, particularly with relation to moral questions, is to inevitably end up acting dishonestly and not being able to face our own natures or the reality of life as it is. Chapter 2, verse 22 ends with the lines, "It is a lie, this folly against self. The exposure of innocence is a lie. Be strong, O man. Lust, enjoy all things of sense and rapture. Fear not that any god shall deny thee for this." And here again, there is a sense that false inhibitions are not a good thing. We all have limits, but the idea that one must somehow preserve innocence and be entirely protected from life is delusional and cannot lead to any kind of strength or balance in life. We can't live our lives sheltered and protected. Naturally, we need to take care of ourselves, and we need to take care of the things that we indulge in. It's no good going about doing things which endanger us or other people, or which end up in addiction or disease, obviously. But, nevertheless, we should be prepared to experience life, and experience it while we can. The Book of the Law doesn't go into great detail about the sort of morality or ethics that we should assume. It rather leaves this up to ourselves to find out, but it is quite clear about some of the things that are not satanic. Chapter 1, verse 31 says, "For these fools of men and their woes care thou not at all. They feel little. What is balanced by weak joys, but ye are my chosen ones." Chapter 2, verse 17, "Hear me, ye people of sighing. The sorrows of pain and regret are left to the dead and the dying, the folk that not know me as yet." Chapter 2, verse 18, "These are the dead, these fellows. They feel not. We are not for the poor and the sad. The lords of the earth are our kinsfolk." Now, in all these chapters, we see that the idea of universal compassion is rejected, and that strength is valued over any kind of victimhood or neediness. That's not to say that we should be uncompassionate to those we are linked with. Of course, we will be compassionate to our friends and loved ones, and we should look after each other. But the idea of universal compassion is repudiated. This is not in accordance with nature. It's not how the world works, and we are basically told not to waste our time with this. We can't actually save the world from itself. That doesn't mean that we need to be cruel, but we should get on with our lives. As a side note, I would say that where the Book of the Law refers to the lords of the earth, I don't think they are simply referring to people who happen to be famous and powerful, as these can clearly be as troubled and weak in spirit as any, notwithstanding their physical positions. I think the lords of the earth are more likely to be those who are noble in spirit and rich in vitality, unself-denying, lovers of life. These are people who are strong and undiscouraged by the difficulties of life. Again, chapter 2, verse 48, "Pity not the fallen, I never knew them. I am not for them. I console not. I hate the consoled and the consoler." Again, universal compassion is rejected, as is the elevation of suffering and victimhood, and the whole idea of salvation. Rather, the Book of the Law encourages us to look to the law of nature, in a sense, and to look to the place of strength and the will to live and fight. These things we need to find in ourselves if we're to be of use to anyone, but most especially to be of use to our loved ones. We need to be strong, and we need to value strength. Then we can look after the people who really matter to us. Now, there are a number of other interesting verses in the Book of the Law. Chapter 2, verse 6, "I am the flame that burns in every heart of man, and in the core of every star. I am life, and the giver of life, yet therefore is the knowledge of me the knowledge of death." Now, in this verse, Satan declares his essential identity with the core of every person, as well as with the deep processes of the universe. This also provides a theological underpinning to the principle of individual sovereignty, which is here indicated as being present in all human beings. We sometimes call this the gift of Set, or the black flame, and it is something which is present in all people, even though it may not be awakened in all people. Chapter 2, verse 22 starts with the words, "I am the snake that giveth knowledge and delight and bright glory, and stir the hearts of men with drunkenness." Now, aside from any esoteric ideas that this refers to the Kundalini, for instance, it's also where Satan presents himself as the enlightening and inspiring serpent that invites humans to experience and explore pleasure and knowledge. In chapter 2, there are a number of verses, notably verses 27 to 33, which deal with the problems of reason and its misapplication. "There is a great danger in me, for who doth not understand these runes shall make a great miss. He shall fall down into the pit called Because, and there he shall perish with the dogs of reason. Now a curse upon Because and his kin. May Because be accursed forever. If Will stops and cries why, invoking Because, then Will stops and does naught. If power asks why, then is power weakness. Also reason is a lie, for there is a factor infinite and unknown, and all their words are skew-wise. Enough of Because, be he damned for a dog." Now, these verses show that reason and the discursive mind have their place, and obviously a very vital place in our functioning, but that place has its limits. We have to remember that thelema refers to will which can lead to work, and obviously to the true will, which can translate into one's true work. There's nothing ineffective about Satanism, and it's a very practical philosophy. These verses indicate that the discursive mind is capable of misapplication, and this misapplication can spoil work. In a sense, it's also a matter of timing. When action and execution are required, whether that's physical or otherwise, it has to be nothing but these. If we continue arguing with ourselves and deliberating and trying to continually recalculate, then we can simply miss the time to act, and we will lose our focus. So what this says is that action requires a kind of purity to it once the preparation has all been done. Again in chapter 2, we have a very interesting verse in verse 58. Yea, deem not of change. Ye shall be as ye are, and not other. Therefore the kings of the earth shall be kings for ever. The slaves shall serve. There is none that shall be cast down or lifted up. All is ever as it was. Yet there are masked ones, my servants. It may be that yonder beggar is a king. A king may choose his garments as he will. There is no certain test. But a beggar cannot hide his poverty. What is really interesting about this verse is that it deals with a very unfashionable concept, notably that of fate. People don't essentially change. Their natures remain what they have always been in essence. Of course, they can change their conditions, they can express themselves differently, they can enrich themselves, they can grow in understanding and fulfill potential, but their basic nature does not change, and it's important that we understand this about ourselves and other people. We do have choices, and there are many ways of expressing any one essential quality, but our essential qualities cannot truly be hidden or escaped. Now, in the book of the law, Satan also tells us quite a few things about himself. Chapter 3, verse 3, Now let it be first understood that I am a God of war and vengeance. I shall deal hardly with them. Here Satan declares himself to be essentially a martial god. There are a number of different planetary qualities that come through the book of the law. Sometimes it's solar, sometimes it's Venusian, sometimes it's martial, and sometimes it's Saturnian. But Satan here declares himself to be very much a god of war, and this fits with his identity with Set. Satanism is very concerned with this world. Satan is known as the Lord of this world, and this world is a kind of battle in many ways. Of course, there is harmony in this world and beauty, but there is also inevitably a quality of struggle and of almost war. Everything is in some senses also in conflict, even though it's also another level in harmony, for it exists in the same world, of course. So Satanism, being very concerned with this world and how we should live here and thrive here, entails a kind of war, even if it entails much else beside. This is just one of the reasons why Satanism cannot be assimilated into a postmodern ecumenicalism or some kind of universalizing interfaith. This is not what Satanism is about. As if to reinforce this, chapter 3, verses 49 to 54 say the following. I am in a secret fourfold word, the blasphemy against all gods of men. Curse them, curse them, curse them. With my hawk's head I peck at the eyes of Jesus as he hangs upon the cross. I flap my wings in the face of Muhammad and blind him. With my claws I tear out the flesh of the Indian and the Buddhist, Mongol and Din. Bahlasti Umpeda, I spit on your crapulous creeds. Now here we see the creeds of all the major world religions are rejected, and rejected very roundly. We and they are inimical to each other, and they are not seen as being of any use to the free individual. We are not about the same things at all. In many respects as well, we are in conflict with them. We are against them. Now, of course, we have to be intelligent about this. We have to be clear. We have to be smart. And we should not waste our time with useless conflict with anything. It's very important as well in Satanism that every man and every woman being a star, everyone being possessed of individual sovereignty, everyone having the black flame within them, whether it is awakened or not. This means that the most important thing is for us to go our own way and to make sure that we are not interfered with. Other people will be going through their own way as well, and we shouldn't interfere with them unless they interfere with us. If they interfere with us, then we need to stop that. But the most important thing is for us to follow our true course. But even though we have a major non-interference policy, it's important for us to be clear and remember that we are not the same as all of these religions, and we are not part of some sort of a universal faith. That's not what we are. We are going by a different route and by a different method, and we can take joy in that, but we do need to understand that the morality of monotheism, which is still so very prevalent, is not our guide and is not really our friend. So we should understand that all the same. But the most important thing is for us to go our own way and do our own work. Now, as you can hear from this podcast, I was indeed speaking as a Satanist, but I do feel that this is still very relevant to paganism and to the efforts of pagans to find their own way in what is an age which is still very much dominated by Christianity and monotheism and the things which it has created. And that includes things like secular humanism and atheism, which in their own way, I do feel are the logical conclusion of monotheism. So anyway, I hope you will find this interesting to consider, and I look forward to speaking to you again.